right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, there is a major warning sign for President Donald Trump's re-election in a new national poll released by Quinnipiac. One of the surest signs yet that the current approach to the handling of the coronavirus crisis will spell disaster for the re-election efforts of the GOP in the Senate and the White House. The poll shows Biden at 50% with Trump at 39%. Granted, this poll has always been particularly unfavorable to Trump, with him never having been above a 7-point margin in the last 10 months. But it was the crosstab numbers in that poll that spelled particular alarm for me. Voters believe Biden would do a better job on coronavirus by a 16-point margin. And on the crucial question of who will do a better job bringing back the American economy, Biden leads Trump with a slim margin of 48% to 47%. This is especially noteworthy because, as you all know from our discussions with the Trump campaign on this show, they are betting that focusing on the economy is the best path to re-election. Now, before this particular poll, nearly every poll release showed voters saying they trusted Trump more on the economy. In this same poll, even in April, Trump led Biden by 49% to 44% on that particular question. So you can see the significant slide against him on the topic that is most likely to dominate the discussion come November. Now, you pair this polling alongside razor-tight Senate races in places like Montana, Kansas, and Arizona, other GOP states, not to mention even the traditional swing states, and we have a very big problem on our hands. The diagnosis is simple. It was never inevitable. This is a direct result of the nearly month-and-a-half-long delay now in the passage of a large fiscal response plan as advocated for by the White House and the Senate Republican majority. During Trump's visit to the Senate Republican caucus lunch earlier this week on Capitol Hill, he reportedly told the senators not to rush a response. To the extent the White House has priorities in this fight, so far they seem to be payroll tax cut, corporate liability, and the expiration of expanded unemployment insurance. I'm not even against any of those, but it's clear that if those things are going to be included, then actual worker benefits also need to be included. Because like I say, I don't know, covering Americans' payroll. Republican messaging has almost wholly focused on ending lockdowns and allowing businesses back to work. I sympathize and embrace that view. Americans were put out of work by their government. They are owed back pay, wages. Businesses are owed government support. But that is not what establishment Republicans are offering. Instead, they are saying that going back to work immediately is enough of an antidote, ignoring reams of data that show that just because we reopen the economy does not mean economic life is coming back anytime soon. To give you an example of just how scared Americans are right now, I turned right back to the Quinnipiac poll, which asked Americans how they feel about going about certain activities regardless of whether their state remains open or not. 74% of Americans think it's unsafe to get on an airplane. 62% say it's unsafe to go on a restaurant. 50% think it's unsafe to go to a barber shop. 49% think it's unsafe to visit a clothing store. 55% say they thought it was safe to go to a workplace outside their home, but a full 39% disagreed. So there you have it. You can reopen things full bore. People will not feel safe spending money in our economy for quite some time. The consumer demand that our economy is structured around is to the tune of 70% of all GDP. It's going to make a massive hit, which means right now, only the government is a big enough and responsible entity to make up the shortfall for worker payroll, and paired with an uncapped paycheck protection program could ensure that demand escalates and eventually approaches 100%, that we won't see mass failure across America. As I see things right now, things are existential. It is exactly now, in the last month of inaction, that the public polling turned against Trump and the Senate races across America began to tighten. Now, the Trump team is correct that its race against Biden is going to come down to the economy. But if the GOP does not take the layup that Nancy Pelosi handed them by not acting on the payroll protection front, then they face literally electoral doom. And as I was writing this, another national poll was released by Reuters Ipsos, showing Biden at 47, Trump at 38, another 11-point deficit. There is nobody I want to see in the White House less than Joe Biden. And I especially don't want to see it paired with a Democratic Senate majority who, while among them are all generally corporate sellouts, all agree on woke cultural tokenism and will rule us certainly one way. And that's the thing, Crystal. I mean, those economic numbers you see that and you're like, oh my God. I mean, 74% of Americans not feeling safe to get on an airplane right now. That's 3/4 of the country, which means that let's say we opened up and resumed air travel, all air travel. You think the airlines can run on 1/4 demand? As I've said so many times, I guess I'm the only guy who knows people who own restaurants because they can't operate at 50% capacity. They can barely keep their lights on with 100% capacity. They can fire most of their staff. Their general, like the mortgage and the debt and all the stuff that they owe, no way they're going to be able to pay that with 50%.
Look, if Biden can stay hidden, he's going to win.
Yeah,
and that's where we are today.
And you can see that here, which is that in the economic numbers, the fact that it's now 48 Biden, 47 Trump, and it was a 5-point margin the other way, as I covered here many times, shows you that the 16-point thing, Biden has always had an edge on the who will you better trust to handle the coronavirus one. Now it's 16 points.
Yeah, it used to be very close.
But you have that plus the economy, and then pair that with the economic data about consumer confidence that I just shared. It's a disaster because there's only one way to do this, and that is if we pick up American the payroll wage subsidy of 80% and we give some sort of continuity to these firms and scale it up as the demand increases in the economy, then everybody feels safe. Yes, it will cost a lot of money, but you know what's going to cost more? Not even just from from a societal perspective, 15% unemployment. 10% unemployment.
Yeah.
You want to have 10% unemployment in this country for 5 years? That's what we're on track to happen. That's actually what we're on track. I mean, that is a disaster, as we all know.
Well, and here's the thing. Yes, Democrats hold the House, but Republicans and especially Donald Trump, are very much going to take the blame for the completely anemic, inadequate response that we've seen in this town. So whatever happens is going to fall at the feet of Donald Trump. And it's completely avoidable. I mean, at the beginning of this crisis, the way that it was unfolding, I thought, there are a lot of elements here that actually could play to his strengths, right? There's a China element here that they've tried to rely exclusively on, and it doesn't connect with people's day-to-day lives of what they're concerned. It is a concern, and they're on the right side of the polling, but you can't collapse your message down to that. It is not nearly sufficient. So there's a China element. There's the desire in this time to have this sort of big boss man energy that we've seen from Andrew Cuomo. I mean, Cuomo, we keep bringing this up, but the dude hasn't even done a good job. Substantively. He has not
Probably the worst in the country.
He has not done a good job. He has 80% approval ratings. And actually, if you look at the governors of all 50 states, there is only one that gets a lower approval rating than Donald Trump on this crisis. Americans want to look to their leaders and have faith in their leaders and give them the benefit of the doubt because it's deeply depressing to have no confidence in your own leader. So they gave him the benefit of the doubt at the beginning, and he just has continued to be all over the place. He doesn't give out accurate information. People don't want during a crisis the kind of turn over the table, wild man thing that they liked about him to start with. That's not what they want in this moment. And so, right now it's on track for absolute disaster. And they're betting big on let's reopen the economy and sort of put the debate about coronavirus response in the past and just focus on the economy. And what you are pointing to and what is so revealing in these numbers is even if you could get that debate, even if infections didn't spike and we had to shut back down and there was tons of needless death, even if everything goes as good as it possibly can and you just have the economic debate, it is not clear that he would win that debate today. And those numbers are so remarkable because, unless I'm mistaken, Donald Trump against Hillary throughout his presidency, up in this campaign, up until now, has always led. This has always been his strongest number on the economy because people think businessman and, and the economy was recovering and doing well under Donald. The stock market was high anyway, and GDP growth, we all know that is not representative of the full economy, but he's always gotten high marks on the economy. So to see that number slipping, that's a real problem.
It's a huge problem. And again, look, at the beginning, there was a moment. I mean, Trump was talking about he's fine with no stock buyback, so all this, there were big proposals coming out of the White House. Now we're not talking about direct stimulus payments anymore. We're not talking about more stimulus payments anymore. We're not talking even about payroll. We're just talking about expanded, corporate liability. We're talking about payroll tax cut. And again, I mean, these are all things that are not bad necessarily. I support any measure in order to juice the economy. It's more that they have to be paired with the downstream distributional benefit of something like a payroll protection. Payroll protection is really the only way that you can significantly juice consumer demand. You got to give people two things. Number one, confidence to spend, but also number two, capital to spend, because it's a bottom-up recession. That's the most important thing to remember here. There's a small glimmer of hope, very small, which is that Cory Gardner, who signed on to this Josh Hawley plan, has actually come out and said that he's considering making it so that the Senate literally can't adjourn until they do something for workers.
Wow.
So look, I'm not going to hold my breath to make sure.
It's interesting, though. It's an interesting development.
Exactly, because again, as we always cover here, Cory Gardner is the most vulnerable Republican. He was probably going to lose even in the best of times.
Right.
So the fact that he's fighting for his political life, signing on to the Hawley plan on workers, and now trying to force the Senate for some action towards that is a very significant event, because it's a signal to anybody who has a tight race in this country. There is a way to try and at least save your candidacy. And if it's a cynical choice to cover Americans' payroll, sign me up, folks.
Good. All about it.
That's all we want.
Well, and, we see the same thing with swing state Democrats partnering with progressives on this same legislation. So clearly, those people who are most vulnerable, at least the smart ones, are looking around and saying, we got to do something. We at least have to be seen as trying here. Mm-hmm. This legislation, unfortunately, frankly, it's way late. We already have millions of people who have been laid off. But it's better late than never. So we should absolutely be pushing forward with that. But yeah, swing state Democrats, Cory Gardner, I'm sure other swing state Republicans are probably looking at these same numbers and thinking this is the direction we need to go in.
Exactly. All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.